Can you see my shared screen?
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dawn. Thank you for joining this webinar brought to you by ASQ Innovation Division. The topic of tonight's webinar is Pacific Foods Innovation Through the Lens of Consumer Obsession. Pacific Foods has a unique history of innovation that inspires new products, shapes our approach to agriculture and animal welfare, and fuels our desire to make an impact beyond the table. Learn about the historical backdrop for Pacific's origin, our vision and culture that supports innovation, how we operate in the larger context of Campbell Soup Company, a design thinker's view of how new products are created, a review of processes and tools needed to be successful, and how we bring it all together with intention and meaning for our consumers. The learning objectives are introduction to Pacific Foods, history, innovation, heritage, communities, with support, Pacific vision, mission, purpose, consumer obsession, and innovation culture, a design thinker's view of innovation at Pacific, process and tools used for innovating, including some recent successes, bringing innovations to life, connecting with and giving back to our communities, looking to the future, what signals we are watching. Please note that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on ASQ Innovation Division YouTube channel. In addition, there will be 10-minute time after the presentation for questions and answers. Please post your questions in the Q&A section of the WebEx tool. Tonight, our speakers are Mr. Casey Young and Ms. Kate New. Casey Young is the Director of R&D for Pacific Foods. In his current role, he is responsible for all research and development activities within the business unit with a strong growth agenda focused on H2 innovations across the organic soup, broth, and plant-based beverages categories. Casey has over 20 years of experience in designing new products with over 18 years in the CPG food and beverage space. Casey has a Bachelor of Science degree in Chemical Engineering and Chemistry from Geneva College and a Master of Business Administration degree from Robert Morris College. Kate New is the Director of Brand Marketing for Pacific Foods. She leads the brand marketing efforts across Pacific and partners closely with cross-functional stakeholders in research and development, innovation and sales to drive portfolio growth and performance. Kate thrives in entrepreneurial startup environments and has more than 15 years of experience in the food and travel industries. Kate most recently joined the Pacific team after more than 10 years of brand retail development and leadership roles with Whole Foods Market. Kate has a Bachelor of Arts in Communication and Media Studies from St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas. Thank you very much, Casey and Kate, for accepting to be our speakers tonight. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Dawn. Thanks for that introduction. And Casey and I are so excited to be here with everyone this evening and to jump right into our presentation. I think we do have some really beautiful slides of Casey and I up front as well, just so you can continue to both see our faces in this deck. But we can hop right in. Here we are. Yes, this is true. And Casey and I both were yet to meet in person. I actually onboarded with the Pacific Foods team during the pandemic. That's right. And so soon this will be a photo of both of us in the same location. Nice to meet everybody. And what we're going to do, obviously, we've talked a little bit through that agenda, but really Casey and I are going to talk about our work in brand and R&D respectively, and the points of intersection that are fueled by innovation, and really looking at how innovation threads through everything that we do, including the foundation of our company. Perfect. And we'll take a look at the Pacific Foods history. So we have a brief timeline here. And of course, as you can see, Pacific Foods actually has its roots in plant-based foods, right? So we began in 1987 launching as a tofu manufacturer and quickly applied sustainability-minded innovation thinking to capture, package, and distribute the nutrient-rich byproduct of tofu, soy milk. Spoiler alert, we all know what this is. But really, it's that type of thinking from day one, right, where our founder and the team that he worked with really wanted to utilize the environment, our innovative thinking, to produce the best possible products endemic to the region, but also using what he had around him, right? So in 97, we added broth. In 1998, adding soup, so moving into our creamy and our hearty soups. And then today, Pacific Foods, of course, focuses on a variety of simple recipes. We source pure, organic quality ingredients. We have a full beverage portfolio and focus all of that actually around plant-based beverage. So everything that you see within our portfolio, and we'll take a little look at that on the next slide in terms of what we have overview-wise. Everything that you see in Pacific Foods portfolio is aseptic, and so it is shelf stable. So there's a sustainability-minded innovation focus just in that concepting from the get-go of how the company was founded, kind of lessening that environmental impact. And really, that portfolio focus is around products that are both plant and animal-based, but again, total of more than 100 shelf-stable SKUs. And that includes both retail and food service. So there's two different elements to the Pacific Foods brand. And our broth and stock really anchors the portfolio, and our plant-based beverage, hearty and creamy soups, they really complete that kind of full platform of pantry nutrition and culinary, right? So that encompasses all of the meal occasions that a consumer might want throughout the day. And as we continue to build out the portfolio and really continue to think about how we launch and develop products, and Casey will talk more about that later, we're really thinking about how to empower the pantry, right? To really take this space that maybe up until recent years, months, wasn't always viewed as the most exciting space, you know, focusing on fresh and other areas of the kitchen and other ingredients. We really want to help folks understand that Pacific Foods and that shelf-stable ingredients can encompass really high quality and can encompass a wide variety of ingredients and processes that are quite different and really can have a high value in nutrition and other important impact points. Next slide, please. And so as we look at this wheel is a really nice tool because it helps you look at Pacific Foods and really understand we make soup, we make beverage, we make broth. We're working on a variety of other exciting things. Some we'll talk about, some we won't. But really Pacific Foods is so much more than food production, right? So there's a lot that goes into the Pacific Foods brand, and something that we talked about up front a little bit was that founder vision, even looking at the type of products that Pacific Foods was launched around plant-based. We all hear quite a bit around plant-based, around incorporating more plants into our eating profiles and habits today. It's that type of founder vision that still is carried through the Pacific Foods lens today in our brand. And before brand activism and community connection, when you think about brands like Tom's or Dove, really started to lean into how can we make the planet a better place, how can we impact wellness with individual consumers, beyond just talking about a product. Pacific Foods was an early adopter and really embraced innovation as a key part of nourishment, right, and a core tenet of our brand architecture. And you see some of that brand architecture displayed here, really as we look at, you know, again, kind of back to that founder vision of not always doing what's easy, right? Like we do what's right, not what's easy. And so this is just a few pieces that walk around that sort of loop when we talk about community connection, helping to end hunger in our local communities and even scaling national programs in the coming years, looking at sustainability focus, waste diversion, the Tetra Pak, right? So looking at some of the environmental impact behind the type of packaging, the environmental friendliness that we really keep in mind as we innovate both on the product side and look at packaging evolution. And really all of that together, the look at food, environment, people, community, and the type of progress we're making to help not necessarily deliver the perfect right answer, but to help demonstrate progress to our consumers and all of our partners, right? Like here's the work that's going into making the world a better place. That really is a great demonstration of that innovative thinking and bringing the brand to the next level. Next slide, please. Okay, and so with all of that, right? What we talked about in the previous slide is really helping to take a stand, right, from a brand standpoint to help consumers understand more about what Pacific Foods does in the community, how we source our ingredients. We'll talk about that in a few slides in the future. But this innovative approach to our brand architecture led us to our current vision, mission, and long-term growth strategies that you see here. And so this is really built around, I'm not going to go line by line, right, but this long-term growth strategy and really our vision is built around the idea that food is more than food, right? And I think we know that when you think about food tradition, food culture, even favorite foods that you love to eat on your birthday, I'm reaching here. But food is more than food, right? It has the power to unlock a feeling, a connection point. And for Pacific Foods, it's about unlocking wellness in every bite, right? So anything from nutrition to connection with friends and family, really building an environment that you want to be in, and even the aspiration to help heal the planet, right? And that can be everything from how we source an ingredient to how we use it, to the package that we place the product in.
Hey, Kate, there's a question that has popped up here from Rhonda. I'll just read it to you if that's all right. What was the catalyst moment behind the founder getting interested in and integrating innovation into the organizational model?
And this is an excellent question, and I won't promise to deliver the perfect right founder answer. I think that it was present really from a day one mindset. You know, I think it potentially, right, when we talk a little bit about that product launch, right? So from the onset of having a product and then having a byproduct and understanding that that byproduct could also be not only of value in building out the future vision and portfolio of the company, but he could have taken this moment and said, like, great, we have a byproduct, we don't need it. What's the most cost-efficient way to dismiss this byproduct? But instead, it was more of a, what is it? How do I understand it? How do I partner with my R&D team to understand what could we do with this, right? So I think it was an unlock moment of asking the question and asking the question of the model and the direction that he wanted to go in. So I would say probably up front that really kind of helped set the stage for it's okay to ask questions. Not only is it okay, but you should. And it's okay to question the direction. And sometimes that might mean a dramatic shift in the way that we work. If that helps answer the question, and kind of the end example is we don't make tofu today, right? Like we really started to understand that type of questioning and that type of adjustment to the work we were doing allowed us to really grow and to innovate in the space we're in today. So the long answer that I gave.
So I'm going to take over now, Kate, if that's all right. Thank you for the setup and the great introduction into Pacific Foods. Good evening, everyone. It's great to get to spend some time with you this evening. So I'm going to coax you through the slides here. You can jump into the next one. I'm going to start tonight a little philosophical, I think, and then we're going to get tactical quickly as we start looking at some tips and tricks that we've developed around innovation. But anytime we talk about innovation, we really need to start with the people. We can debate if culture drives process or if process drives culture, but either way, when both are moving in the same direction, then there's a lot of power there. This Venn diagram here starts at the top with creativity. We're born with this, with creativity, and systematically learn to suppress it as we go through life. So I want to make sure that our teams have that imagination mindset, that growth mindset, as we think about and imagine our future. Space. So space is physical, to be sure, but also think about mental space and time on our calendars for thinking. Sometimes we don't have space for those kinds of things. We are most successful when we think about the work we are doing, which is going to be a major theme of mine in the next section. And finally, tools. Tools come in all shapes and sizes, including skills that we have, including our network of people that we know, including things that we don't even know exist yet. And when all three of these things come together, then that's really where the magic of innovation happens. And the role that Kate and I have at Pacific as leaders is to really keep our teams operating at this intersection where they can be the most high-performing as teams and also innovative as creators. Juan, you can jump to the next slide. So it might be obvious, but our culture sets the stage for everything that we do. I use this internal framework here, why, what, who, how, when, and with our teams on Monday mornings. We start every week with a scouting meeting on Monday mornings, and we ask ourselves the question, what did we see this weekend when we were out shopping? What new products are there that we want to taste together? What trends do we see emerging or starting to fade? But really behind that, the big question, behind the question that we ask ourselves is, how can we make Pacific Foods even better? Nobody is answering that for us. Even though we're owned by a bigger company, we still get to answer that question for ourselves. And we take that responsibility seriously, and we answer it very proudly. Dawn, you can jump to the next one. So our recipe for success. For successful innovation is simple and builds on our analysis of how to win. We don't have limited consumer insight. We have rooms full of consumer insight. And these insights are the engine that drives our culinary, our nutrition, our packaging, and serve to accelerate our design process. So less trial and error, more powerful, purposeful designs, so we can quickly respond to dynamic trends that we see. I'm going to talk about more on this in detail in a few minutes, but for now, what I really want you to see is that our approach is simply highly focused on innovating quickly and efficiently across sense-making of insights, the design of our products, and the execution of innovation, whether it's line extensions or new to the world platforms or even non-product innovation, as Kate has talked about. And navigating this blend of these types of innovations is crucial, and this is really the background of every decision that we make as a leadership team at Pacific. So Don, you can jump to the next one. So this slide is too busy, I know, and I promise not to over-present it because I'm sure you're familiar with this and you're going to grasp it quickly, but this idea of design sprints, it's something that has emerged and become more popular, really popular in the last decade, and it's a significant tool that we use at Pacific. I know there are lots of versions out there. Google has a version. There's some really useful and interesting books out there. People working in IT, though, this is one that I've been watching closely, using Agile Scrums as a form of sprinting. All of those things are great. And the steps are really pretty simple. We start by asking ourselves some critical key questions. We implement a plan to answer those. We review the answers. Then we look back in a retrospective to see if we accomplished our goal or not. What I want to stress is that sprinting is not about rushing. It's a very thoughtful and a very intentional process. More than anything, it's about focus and getting the right voices in the room at the right time to make the right decisions. And usually Kate's team and my teams are often at the core of these. But we also need to be really intentional about who is sitting in our blind spots for us. So just to reflect, be tight on who we invite, or if we don't invite, be really purposeful about that. The role they have, require their full attention, block time on calendars. As I mentioned, all these things are really important. But over my career, I've really watched innovation teams get paralyzed over having too much information, over information. So sprinting really allows us to learn what we need to learn and then move on. So in the spirit of moving on, the next slide, Don. So pull us all together, Casey. At Pacific, we get inspiration from a lot of different sources. We systematically tinker with the ideas we have. We prioritize the best ideas to move forward. Why is there an accordion here? I'm not playing. It's a metaphor, though. It's a metaphor for the number of iterations that we go through on an innovation project. Sometimes we're designing for a small component of a project, so we converge on a solution and push towards it. And sometimes we're designing for a strategy, so we diverge to include a lot of data points and pull things apart. And almost always we do this over and over again until we get what we need. Sequencing these together in an insightful way becomes part of our strategic plan, our strat plan, and but I want to stress that it isn't necessarily a straight line. For example, we recently conducted a cooking sprint on cooking innovation, which isn't a surprise with broth. We're a big cooking company. But partway through, we realized that we saw some things happening in the functional food space that we thought were really interesting. So we paused what we were doing. We ran a couple of sprints there in functional food. So we pivoted, overlapped for a few weeks. Now we're in the process of reconciling what we've learned and pulling it all back in. So that's agile to me as we use these sprints in our process. So Kate, I think I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey. And in the spirit of really, what you're speaking about when we talk about that dynamic, iterative approach, right? Always evolving and really understanding that it's a live environment, right? We want to stay connected. We want to continually test, learn, and evolve. we take that same approach, right, to some degree as we look at our vision, mission, and purpose as a company, and keeping our roots at our core, really making sure that we hold fast, right, to that founder vision, hold fast to that highest quality, to really embracing our communities, et cetera. But in doing so, right, we want to continually find ways to connect meaningfully through our vision, mission, and purpose. At the end of this section, we're actually going to take a look at some of our campaign work that launched last year. So drumroll, get excited, and we'll dive into taking a look at this vision, mission, and purpose. Okay, so our vision, right? And this is really focused around the pantry, and it's focused around well-being. And here we look at a variety of images, right, that bring to mind freshness, connection, family. Again, a comprehensive picture to understand that we want to use the pantry as a point of power to really push off of all of the stories we tell about Pacific foods, and to give little peeks behind the curtain, right? How does this really work when we're talking about the brand team, working with the R&D team, working with all of our innovation focuses and future years of work, that it's a much bigger picture, right, than that box of soup that you see sitting on your shelf. Okay, next slide. Okay, and so our mission, right, ingredient obsession. Obsession is something that, you know, when we're talking about ingredients and quality, it's definitely a positive attribute. And that ingredient obsession has this connection point to all of the different ways that we formulate our ingredients, formulate our recipes rather, and ways to really look at ingredients as, again, empowering the pantry and empowering folks to make really good choices to nourish their body and help restore the planet, right? And this speaks a little bit to some of, and I'm sure if you've ever picked up a box of Pacific food soup, that you see in some cases, you know, particular attribution or call outs around how we source our ingredients, where they're coming from. It's organic, right? It's non-GMO, and these are core components of how we're helping, even in a small way, to make impact as a brand, and then empowering the consumer to make that impact themselves, right? Even in that singular purchase for lunch or dinner for their family or for themselves, they're a part of that ingredient obsession and they're a part of that impact. Next slide. Okay, and so our purpose. And I'm going to pause here for a second and say, you know, I think that most folks might make the assumption that soup and plant-based beverage and broth doesn't have the power to change the world, but we think it does, right? And so this is that tiny but mighty journey approach that we take from everything to you know, ideation around, you know, future expansion into different categories, to improving upon our current portfolio, to expanding, et cetera. We believe that everyday food choices have the power to make an impact beyond the table. And again, that might be one small step, one small bowl at a time, but this belief, right, that we can do it together, and that we can connect all of these points, right? It's our farmers, it's our ingredient sourcers, it's our R&D team, it's our brand team. All of us together are creating this impact beyond the table. And this is our campaign.
Here at Pacific Foods, Willamette Valley specifically, we take cues from nature to make organic food taste terrifically. We prepare our soups meticulously, simmer bone broth low and slowlifically, and source cream localifically. So yeah, you could grab anything off the shelf, or you could choose Pacific specifically.
Kate, are all of those real words? Some of them sound made up to me.
Those are all real words, Casey. Don't question marketing, never.
Okay.
No, some of those are made up words. That's a good catch. And some of that, right, is to create a little bit of a playful connection with our consumers. And that playful connection, right, is, again, this continued invitation to our extended community that we continue to build and continue to welcome everyone into, to really come on the journey with us, right? We take food really seriously, we take ingredients really seriously, we take organic really seriously, but we're on a journey, right? We're on a journey to continually improve, and we want folks to come with us. So back to you, Casey.
Oh, thanks, Kate. So I'm going to talk in some detail now about design thinking. And Don, you can take us to the next one. Because this is really a key thing that we use. So how might we use design thinking for innovation? Well, let me just pause and say, how might we? That's a common question that we ask ourselves. And I love it because it just opens the possibilities for us, and it really is the call of the innovator. The design thinking, I'll start with a little bit of an introduction here. It's a common phrase and a common idea that has a lot of different, it's a lot of different things, which means you've probably seen some different forms of this. I think my first involvement in it was a 30-minute video that I watched quite a few years ago from the D School at Stanford. I think the topic was how to select your perfect birthday gift, which I selflessly used on my wife, and it worked. So since then, I have built on and evolved my own philosophy about design thinking. The principles on the slide are generic, and since I don't subscribe to any specific paradigm or program, but generally you'll find that it involves these steps in approximately this order. We emphasize, we define, we ideate, we prototype, and we test. And you can really move through these steps fairly quickly and efficiently. I think this is a great field of study if you want to learn more. Not quite yet. But it's also something that you can just jump into pretty easily, no matter where you are in life. Unofficially, I think my involvement in design and thinking goes back much further to imagine a 5-year-old version of me, and I got my first set of Legos. If any of you are like me and can identify with Gen X, remember when Legos came like that stack in the middle? It was a lot of different types of pieces. Some of them would be long and skinny. Some of them were hinged with some movement. Some of them had some different colors. But the beauty was that you could have the same set of pieces and build a lot of different things out of it. You could build a rocket ship, you could build a snowman, you could build a dinosaur. All of those things actually represent career aspirations for me at some point in my life. But the goal so the task when you're 5 years old is to try to get as many different pieces as possible into the set so you could make as many different things as possible. Well, the same principle kind of applies today, and you can use that in innovation. Or tools that you have in your toolbox, the more different types of designs that you can make. On the right hand, you see a recent purchase that we made as a family during quarantine now. We kind of rediscovered Legos again and started doing some projects like this. It's an amazing evolution, I think, on a fairly simple plastic block, but also the implications in modern life are pretty cool. So my takeaway is this: how you enter into the design thinking process is really what's key. You can take the same Legos or the same innovation insights, that you can build remarkably different outcomes out of them. Some of them will work, some of them will not work. It all depends entirely on what problem you're trying to solve. And it's really critical that you can accurately define, articulate, and study the problem that you're solving. Otherwise, you have no idea if the solution you end up with actually gets what you want or not. So I'm going to jump over to a video also. Don, it might be a little bit choppy, but hopefully you can follow along with the idea here.
What happened, Joey? Your head is stuck? Really? Hey, how'd you do that? What were you doing when you did that? Joey? Hold on, Johnny. Daddy's coming. He'll help you out.
butter.
Joey, what did you do? Okay, calm down. Oh, baby.
So there, I think you see that the problem is pretty clear. Even though the dog is, oh, not quite yet. Yeah. Even though even the dog is showing some signs of empathy there when he came over and put the paw on him, you can see that the dad's working a few solutions there. There's a bucket of Blue Bunny ice cream. I don't really know what he was planning on doing with that, but he tried to stretch the bars. Of course, that's something I definitely would try. But how many times do we jump right into problem solving before we really understand the specific details of the problem itself? The next video is a little bit quicker, and it's going to show how Joey actually gets freed. And good news, nobody gets hurt, and no animals get hurt as a part of this. So, Don, if you want to jump to the next one.
What happened?
I know what.
Okay, how are you going to get out?
I do.
Hey, you got out!
Yeah, I got out.
So it's a cute video. I know Joey's happy. Maybe the dad's a little embarrassed. I'm not sure. Don, you can take us to the next slide. And I'm going to try really hard now to pull all this back into food. So as Kate mentioned, we make a lot of soup, right? So I'm going to walk you through a few different case studies of design thinking using some different types and flavors of soup. In this first case, let's look at these two photos and talk about what a problem to solve might be. On the left is a culinary soup from a nice restaurant, or maybe this is a soup that your grandma used to make. Bright colors, big pieces of steak and potato and carrot and onion, a rich broth to help create a flavor, a sprig of parsley from the garden to show you how fresh it is. Overall, it just looks delightful, doesn't it? On the right is a retorted soup. Similar ingredients, but appears highly processed. It lacks the vibrancy of color. The pieces are not identifiable. Broth is tough to see. Actually, it covers over everything, and that's all I can see. There is a build on this slide if you want to try that. Even when I try to, is there a build there? There we go. Even photoshopping in some parsley, it still doesn't actually do it for me. So let's dig into how we might look to articulate the problem for this. All right, so there's going to be a few builds on the next slide, and I'll just kind of walk you through them. Let's take a look at the process. Imagine that this is your grandma's soup. So here's how she might have made it. You start with a pot on the stove, get it hot, add the steak in to brown it. There's a build, add some vegetables to saute, and maybe that helps to build up some of the flavor. Maybe she adds some wine to deglaze it. Who knows, maybe she actually sips some wine while she's doing that. Then she adds some garnish at the end, but she doesn't want to get overcooked and get smushy. And then she lets it simmer for a while on the stove. Maybe that's the smell you remember walking into her house, and that delicious, fresh goodness that was the aroma in her house. But look at the temperature or the thermometer on the left there, and let's track actually what was happening to the temperature profile or thermal load of the soup as she was cooking it. One more build here. You can see that the temperature is, one more build here, Don. Yeah, so temperature is quite high when you have dry ingredients at the beginning. Once you add the liquid in, then it drops and cools down a little bit, and then you build it back up. So Maybe this isn't a perfect representation. I didn't actually measure this, but I think it's a pretty intuitive kind of logic to follow. So let's go to the next slide. If that's the culinary soup, let's look at what a shelf-stable retorted soup might look like. This is not going to be a deep dive on retort technology, but I think we can think about it intuitively again. We add all the ingredients of the can, then we heat the can to cook the food inside. It's a classical retort technique that's been used for centuries. And what does that temperature profile look like? So that's the black one on the page there. We start low, we build temperature over time, then we hold it, then we have a slow come down. And then you can see the overlay of the two. So I think that's pretty clear on why the products are so different from each other. And it actually makes me think about like what the word cooking actually means. Clearly cooking has two pieces. It's about transforming the food, but it's also sterilizing the food. Both are very important parts of our process, but it comes to life quite differently in these two samples. I'm not going to get into specifics on how we might choose to solve this, a problem like this, but I hope you can appreciate that there is value in an exercise like this in understanding what the problem to solve is. Can jump to the next one, Dawn. And here I'm going to take a look at a topic that's pretty closely related to it. This one is more about the flavor in soup. Once again, it's not going to be a deep dive on flavor chemistry, don't worry. But I do want to give you a sense of how we think about flavors in our soup. What I'm showing on the screen is one of the key chemical transformations that our food scientists see and deal with in our liquid food systems. You may have heard of Maillard reactions or the Amadori rearrangement. That's the pathway that I'm showing you here. I like this one in particular because I think Mario Amadori has such an amazing mustache that I'm very jealous of. But it involves some interactions of proteins and sugars in the system, creates a range of different flavors depending on the conditions that are applied. Some of those flavors are really good, some are bad. And the key is understanding the differences in those, and that becomes a critical component in building towards a solution. So you can jump to the next one here. Talking about flavors, we can use both analytical and sensory techniques to understand the flavor dynamics that are going on within the products. Note that I made these intentionally small so that we don't get too caught up in specific details here. But I want to give you a clear view of what the differences are. The spider chart is from a sensory descriptive panel, and you can see some mixed success where we were able to achieve the right shape and some places where we didn't. And so some of those differences are important. On the GCMS graph, you can visually start to grasp some of the key differences in compounds that are present. The retorted one is on the top and the fresh one is on the bottom. So we can take that information and we can tie it back through literature to some key material inputs and help our formulators through the development process. In this example, I'm kind of glossing over some of the specific technical details to show you how the sense making pulls all these pieces together. So this is me playing with my Legos here. Jump to the next slide, please. The framework that we can use to think about this is kind of a curve, and I call it a flavor curve. And it realizes the fact that our brain actually processes information in series and not in parallel. So over the course of a consumption event like eating or sipping soup, you perceive distinct flavors one after another. Depending on how refined your palate is, you may or may not actually observe this or are aware of it that it's happening, but it is. Even in complex systems where there's a lot going on, if you really focus and pay attention, maybe you'll notice it. Why is this important? Well, these are the design components that I can piece together in a certain way. Flavors that fall into the first part, the left part of the curve, need to connect back to the name of the variety that you bought. So if you buy our chicken soup, I bet you want to taste chicken right away as part of that first part of the curve. We can even get fancy and specific. Is this white chicken? Is it dark chicken? Is it roasted chicken? Is it chicken fat? Or is it some signature blend of all of those? That determines how we formulate. The flavors that fall into the second part of the curve help to define or build on the character or the tonality of the soup. Maybe this is the vegetables or your mirepoix. Maybe it's textural elements like creaminess or other things that will help to carry the flavor, things like that. We call it the journey because it really is a continuation of where you started. Then an interesting transition happens. Flavors that fall into the third part of the curve need to be different from the first two, and it's a design prerogative that I like to use. We need to cleanse the palate here. Something that drives umami or sour is good depending on what the product is, and that gives us a chance to build a second set of experiences within each bite. Maybe it's a signature spice or some heat that helps with those flavors to tingle and dance around on your tongue. I can decide specifically what this looks like based on the job to be done by the soup, which is why my connection with marketing is so important as we define those. Do I want a product that helps me relax and settle down? Do I want a product that builds up energy so that I can tackle a big project? Do I want a product that complements a certain beverage or side dish? As designers, we can do a lot of different things as we translate the problem into a solution. So I can jump to the next slide. I'm not going to dwell on this much longer, but here's a recent innovation. You saw this product in one of the earlier slides from Kate, and actually I have a sample here sitting on my desk as well. It's the new Moroccan sweet potato soup. It's a creamy, aseptic, organic creamy soup using vegan, plant-based materials and ingredients, and captures some of the ethnic trends that we see in market, especially from the Mediterranean. When we thought about what the experience we wanted the consumers to have when eating a soup like this, here's the sequence of flavors that seems to make the most sense to us. Now, as quality professionals, I'm sure you're much more experienced at building designs of experiments than I am, but this is a tool that is ripe for a DOE. As we go through the various steps of designing a food, we can decide, do I want to cleanse with sour or umami? Well, I can test that. Do I want to extend the coriander spice into the aftertaste, or do I want to stop it with some astringency? I can test that. So a really useful tool for us. And Kate, I'm going to throw it back to you now.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey. Okay, so we're gonna hop back over again to the brand side, to the community side, and here we're gonna take a look at, of course, bringing innovation to life and connecting with our communities. And I think just up front, before we dive into a couple of these slides, you know, when you think about community activation, partnership, volunteer work, I don't know that you would always connect it with innovation, and I think that's a fair question. Something that's really unique to Pacific Foods and unique to other brands within the industry, but again, this is something that's been part of Pacific Foods' DNA since inception, is that we want to do what's right? And doing what's right helps fuel some of that innovative thinking, and that we know that creating community boxes filled with food for families in need is the right thing to do, right? But how do we apply that thinking and really apply that logic into creating an even bigger community outside of our headquarters community in Tualatin, in Oregon? Okay, so we'll jump in. Thank you. Long intro. So this is a really great visual model in terms of looking at sustainable businesses and looking at businesses. Again, I keep using this word journey, right? Pacific Foods is absolutely on a journey of continuing to embrace, again, that founder vision, what's right, not what's easy. And we're on a journey of sustainability as we look to continually improve our ingredients and sourcing and impact on the planet, right? And this is not a one and done, right? This is a continuing to learn and iterate. And this is where you really see, both from a sustainability and a community perspective, application of that innovative thinking of looking at what's working, right? What's working, how do we apply that, and then how do we scale it? And how do we also look at things that may not be working, right, and adapt and evolve? Next slide. Thank you. And so we are leading as a purpose-driven brand. And here we've got kind of a snapshot. Again, there's a lot of information on this slide here. But what we do, right, is really focus on key prioritized ingredients and areas where we know we can drive impact. And these areas, they touch on soil health, animal welfare, social fairness. You see some different icons and some different attributes that I'm sure you're familiar with across the different products that you might purchase in the store. And really what Pacific Foods is focused on is that learning, right, that iterative, and then that innovation behavior to really look at how we can fuel not only the growth of the company, but the growth of this component of our brand, of the community, and that purpose-driven element. And there's a few reasons there, right? Again, it's what we truly believe at the core of our brand to what is best for the planet, what's best for the brand. But there's also this element of understanding consumers today, and this is especially prevalent amongst more recent and even younger consumers, of understanding that a brand has a connection to making positive change in the world. And that's going to look a little bit different for every individual consumer. But when you start to break down that data and those consumer segments, that ever-growing sort of younger demographic of consumers is really looking for brands that can deliver on that type of promise, and that's a great fit for Pacific Foods. And again, here you just sort of see those areas that we're focused on. You see some of those key partners that we're looking at, everyone from the Organic Trade Association to the Rodale Institute, so really looking at how we continue to grow and learn and take folks on that journey with us. And so we do talk, and we kind of bounce back and forth a little bit, and do speak broadly when we're talking about community and sustainability, because quite frankly, it is one big global community here. But in a hyper-local fashion, we have a really great community partnership that we're really proud of. And Dawn, if you wouldn't mind, the video is awesome, and it's we're going to start with the video. Enjoy this. And you are seeing real Pacific Foods team members, PS, in this video. This is an example. This is a really awesome food drive, and something that Pacific Foods has continued to partner with the Oregon Food Bank over the years, I think more than 20 years, right, of continued partnership. And that partnership, again, is something that it's the right thing, it's a great fit, it's where we're headquartered, but it also serves as inspiration as we, over the last few years, have kind of really looked at iterating that community partnership and that donation behavior to help scale nationally, right? We'll always have that hometown and that local focus because of our connection in that smaller micro community. But how do we take that larger, right? Like how do we continue to embrace being a national brand and really looking at ways to impact our even broader community? So that type of thinking is really what drives Pacific Foods to continue to integrate and learn and innovate in that community space with our brand.
Sorry, Kate, I can replay the video again.
Okay. Thank you.
At Pacific Foods, we believe that everyone deserves access to nourishing food. That's why we support the KGW Great Food Drive. Please give. Just go to kgw.com/food-drive and make a donation.
And the star of that video is actually one of our Pacific Foods brand team members anyway. But thank you, Dawn, that's perfect.
At Pacific.
And I'll hand it back to you, Casey.
Yeah, and believe it or not, in one of our leadership team meetings this afternoon, we were talking about making sure that we had the right blend of foods that were in those boxes and making sure that we were servicing our community right and getting protein into the hands of people that desperately need that. So I'm going to close it out here with just a couple of slides here. I know we're getting close to time, so I want to make sure we have an opportunity for some questions too. So looking ahead, we look at signals, right? So signals are remnants of the teacher in our life today. And so some of the signals that we're watching are around functional foods. Many belief systems around the world connect food and health and wellness together. And so there are a lot of things there that are happening all the time. And so we watch that one very closely. Plant-based, you've seen this theme throughout the conversation, not only because of the nutritional benefits, but the connection back to organic, the connection back to regenerative, and what we can do to our environment and our soil and our community and our planet and all those things are really powerful. There's this large movement of things that we call Flexitarians today, people that are making very complex decisions about where they are and aren't choosing to bring some plant products into their diets. Food tribes, whether it's paleo or gluten-free or these things that are popping up all the time, have some consistent themes to them. And so we watch those and think about the role of personalization in those. Food exploration, people are curious about food, and that really drives a lot of creativity in some of the segments that we're watching. And so we try to think of ways that we can be provocative, cutting edge, but also mainstream enough to be familiar and comfortable for people. Snacking on the go is a big behavior. It continues to be on the rise. We're going to watch that and see how it fits in. And then the last one is carefully crafted, which is a really important one for Pacific, thinking about like specifically Pacific and the tongue twister that Kate introduced earlier, because we really want to do things for a purpose. And so like that crafted idea, whether it's, you know, you're thinking about bread or you're thinking about flavor or whatever, doing things that are put together for a certain reason makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to pause because I think I see a couple questions here. So question for, do you mind if I hold these for just like one more minute and let me get through the last slide and then we'll jump into them. Dawn, you can take us to the last slide. So that's what consumer trends we're following. On the technology side, something that's really close to me, we watch that space too. So supply and demand, right? So this is the supply. Clean label technology is increasing and changing significantly and very quickly in this. Here's the ingredient statement for what a banana looks like, in case you didn't know. People love the idea of having things that they can identify and relate to and even better pronounce. Fermented is not new. It's a technology that's been around there for ages, thousands of years even, but definitely re-emerging, right? Whether it's kombucha or all kinds of things that have metabolite health impacts for us. Sustainability is going to be a key one to keep an eye on, and this is evolving very rapidly, and not only from a sustainability, good for the environment kind of standpoint, but just thinking about our dependence on petroleum products and those types of things and the role that those have in our overall ecosystem. And then the last one is 3D printing of food. I don't know if we're ever going to be 3D printing cheeseburgers. There's a part of me that thinks that that's super cool. Probably doesn't fit with real food, but in real life, there are some plant-based things that I think you could really conceivably do. I don't know if we'll ever get to the like replicators from Star Trek, if there are any Star Trek fans out there, but definitely the idea of personalization and customization and our ability to get nutrition at the moment where it's needed to the person where it's needed, I think, is what 3D printing kind of signals for me. So we are at the end of our content today. I think that's our last slide, right? Awesome. So thank you. I am going to read the questions now. And Kate, if there are any of these that you want to answer, feel free to. But the first one from Rhonda was, what's the most interesting innovation that has come out of our Monday meetings? It's a good one. Do you have thoughts on that one?
You know, I'm thinking we've had some really good builds. We do a lot of, and Casey, I know you mentioned this, we do a lot of tasting, a lot of competitive tasting and ideation and brainstorming. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I think we've been looking at a lot recently at, I mean, I don't think I'm surprising anyone by saying there's a lot of interest in consumers today in the space in immunity, right? Like imagine going through a global pandemic and not wondering about immunity. So there are a lot of products that we've been watching and kind of thinking about, like, what's the role of food in that? You know, clearly, you know, this is not about COVID, but you can hear a lot of opinions, right? And so we've been watching that one really, really interestingly. And so almost every week we have some immunity focus to it, just looking at, you know, what are people eating? What are the vitamins that are connecting to it, that type of thing. So that one's been a fun one to watch. And then there's another question, if you have Monday Syncs weekly, how do you keep innovation fresh? Not sure I totally get that question, but I think, I don't know, Kate, do you have thoughts on that one?
Yeah, well, the way that I'm kind of interpreting that, and Rhonda, please tell us if that's right or wrong, is, you know, I think sometimes, especially in virtual world, right, like prescriptive, repetitive meetings, sometimes that doesn't feel creative, or that doesn't feel like the space where you're having that aha moment. So that's sort of how I'm reading it, so hopefully that's right. But some of the ways that we battle that are by having a few different folks lead those meetings, and different folks across the board drive the theme, drive the focus. And that's where, quite honestly, while Casey and I, sponsored those meetings, and Casey did really excellent work in setting up kind of the launch of that type of programming for the team, there was big intention in kind of stepping away to say, team, you drive, right? What do you want to taste? What do you want to talk about? With guardrails and support, of course, from our team, from us as individuals. But that's how we keep it fresh, right? There's brand new folks on our team. There's folks across all disciplines that will join and ask questions and share unique experiences, and that really helps keep the ideation fresh and helps keep the theme fresh. It doesn't feel prescriptive. It definitely feels a little bit more inspirational and unscripted. So.
Yep. A couple more here. Is innovation part of the onboarding process, and if so, what does that entail? I actually think innovation is part of our recruiting process, isn't it? Like, whenever we have candidates come in, and are interviewing for R&D role for sure, and I would imagine the same is true for brand, really wanting to know that the creativity is there. And so, we've talked about some pretty specific examples of what innovation is, but laddering it to how Kate started the talk today about it's a mindset, so that creativity can come through whether it's business practices or new products, or just how connected they are in their own spheres of influence. So yeah, I think we're on the lookout for that pretty quickly, and the culture that we have, that's where I started too, was it's so entrepreneurial. That's the magic that we've really tried to keep, that I think the connection into our culture is pretty obvious, and it's pretty quick, and I think people can hit the ground running pretty easily on it. What's on all of your, not reading that right, what is on your radar looking forward to 2030? What trends are you seeing? I'll take a shot at this one, and then you can too as well, Kate. I'll start with nutrition. I think nutrition continues to be something that's really important to people. Customization, personalization, looking at what's happening. I talked about some signals, but other things that we're watching, what's the role of big data? What's the role of people being willing to integrate certain biomarkers of themselves, whether it's through something like 23andMe or apps on their phone, and being able to connect that to food, being able to connect that to stress, being able to connect that to activity. I see these loops starting to close a little bit more and being a little bit more integrated in terms of what a person needs, how a person is aware of it, how they are finding solutions. I think there's a lot of integration across all those that will happen.
It looks like we have one more question from Ricardo. Do you guys consider the health and safety element while innovating, and how? An example, hypothetically designing a product that is 100% without ingredients that could cause allergy. And thank you, Ricardo, for your kind words about our presentation. It's very nice.
Do we consider health and safety? Yeah. So we want our food to be healthy, and we want it to be safe, right? So I think the safety requirement, it's interesting because there are certain standards that are out there, whether it's FDA or USDA. We also highly get the benefit of a company like Campbell Soup Company, which is our parent company, as a result of this. Company with 150 plus years of experience, really understanding what's happening at a microbiological level, what's happening with, swallowing hazards, those types of things. And so there is a rigorous review that we go through. Obviously, we want things that are generally recognized as safe. We use that to build toolboxes. And so as we're scouting for ingredients, we start to pull them in early, so that we can, whenever we're ready and we see a trend coming up, we're able to pounce on it, whether it's, a new form of protein. We'll already have some idea of what we can do. Or I personally get really excited in the gut health space. Gosh, that's a weird sentence to say, but gut health is the key to so many biological processes. And so we've been scouting in this probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics, whatever biotics word you want to say, to have the right tools in there to be able to jump into things that are happening quickly. You mentioned allergies. Interestingly, I've been watching Allergies for 20-some years. how that has come and gone. And actually, it seems as though you know, we're still going to label as we're required to. We're seeing some indications that in some populations the allergenicity is starting to drop a little bit. And so that's great. I think there's some great tactics that parents have been using with kids, and you definitely see some things in schools that are happening to help with this. So yeah, I think those are all great questions. Don, I see we're at the top of the hour here. Do we
have any other questions from okay. Thank you very much again, Kate and Casey, for your presentation. And I would like to remind everyone that you can find the recording of this webinar on ASQ Innovation Division YouTube channel. If we do not have any other questions, so thank you all again for joining this webinar and have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Have a great evening.
Yeah, appreciate everybody. Thank you, Don. Thanks, team.